Hi Year 3, hope you've had a great weekend and have done lots of nice things together as a family. So today for maths, we are actually going to be looking at something that we have done before as a class together. But it's one of those things that sometimes we have to go back and remind ourselves of different skills that we've learned, because we introduce so many new ideas along the way as well, that we need to make sure that we can remember the things that we've learned from a little while ago. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. But before we do that, we're going to get our maths brains in gear, and we're going to be doing our 5 a day. So this is also a good way just to remind ourselves of things that we have learnt recently as well. So in today's folder, there is a sheet which has got your 5 a day questions on there for you to have a look at. So hopefully you have got that printed off. Those are the questions there. Wonder if anybody has spotted my mistake on the sheet today for 5 a day, those observant ones. I know there's some very observant children amongst you. Wonder who spotted the mistake. Yeah, it's the wrong date, isn't it? What's wrong about the date? Did we spot 8.1.21? We're not in January anymore. We've moved into February, so that should be 8.2.21. So well done if you spotted the mistake on that there. Regardless of the wrong date on there, those are your questions for today. So give yourself some time to answer them. No longer than 10 minutes. Don't spend too long on it if you're really struggling, but just give yourself a chance to have a little go at those questions. And once you've had a go, then we're going to go through them together and see how you've got on. Okay, so you need to pause the video now, and then once you have paused the video, then you've had a go at doing the questions, you can come back to me and we will see how you have done. Okay, so good luck with your 5 a day, and I shall see you in a moment. So welcome back. Hope you managed to get on okay with today's questions. There were a few different types of questions there, looking at different topics that we've done over the past few weeks, just to see if we can still remember some of those things that we have learned. So the first question that we had was actually something that went back quite a way, right back to probably one of the first things that we looked at in the autumn term, and that was thinking about our place value and thinking about how we can use our digits. So we were given the digits 4, 6 and 3. Okay, so I'm going to come back out of this for a moment so you can see the board nice and clear. Now, the question was to think about all the different possible numbers, 3-digit numbers that we could make using those 3 digits there. Now, if you remember when we talked about this before, we said the thing that we have to do is we have to be very methodical and systematic in how we're working to make sure that we get all the different possibilities, because if we go about it in quite a random way, we can very easily miss something out. So it's always good to have a system or an order to work to. And when we looked at doing this before, we talked about how it can be a good idea to start with maybe the smallest number that we could make and work from that, or possibly the biggest number that we can make. And then we work in order to try and work through all the different other numbers. Okay. So if we went with the option of the smallest number that we were looking at, the smallest number, I would have to look at the smallest digit that I have there in my 3 digits, and that's going to go in my highest value column. So because we're looking at 3-digit numbers, we know we're going to be looking at hundreds, tens and ones. So my 3 is going to go into my hundreds column. That's going to give me my smallest value. And then I've got to think about which one I'm going to be putting in my tens and my ones column. Well, if I want my smallest number, then I'm going to have to put my next smallest number, which is my 4 in here, in my tens column. And then my 6 is going to go into my ones column. So the first 3-digit number that I've made is 346. Now, being methodical, I've made one 3-digit number where I've got a 3 in my hundreds column, but I can make another one as well. So if I stick with my 300. Rather than this time having my 4 in the tens column, I'm going to put my 6 in the tens column and then my 4. So those are my 2 3-digit numbers that I can make with my 3 in the hundreds column. Now I can't make any other 3-digit numbers where I have got my 3 in my hundreds column there. So I'm now going to move on to my next highest number. So this time I'm going to be looking at putting my 4 into my hundreds column there. Now I've used my 4, so I've got a 6 and a 3. Now if I'm looking for my doing this in order from smallest to biggest, I'm going to want to put my 3 in here and then my 6 in there. So I've made 436. And then my next number that I can make with keeping my 4 in here is going to be 463. So I'm really just swapping those 2 digits around there, but I'm doing it in a way where I'm keeping my order and I'm still being systematic. So I've done my numbers in the 300s that I can do. I've done my number in the 400s that I can do. So that must mean I'm now going to go on to my 600s. So thinking about order again, for my going up in smallest to largest, I'm going to be doing 6 there. My 3 is going to go into my 10s. My 4 is going to go into my 1s. And then my last one that I can make here is 643. So I've gone from my smallest number, systematically getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until I've got to my largest number that I can make there. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers that we could have made there using those 3 digits. Okay, so well done if you found all of those combinations there. So more than just one answer for that one there, wasn't it? Okay, so that's our first question of our 5 a day. Let's have a look at our next question. So we'll just go back to our sheet just to make sure we can see which question we're looking at first. So what do we need to add to 65 to get to 100? Okay, so we've got to work out what we've got to add on from 65 to get to 100. Now, this is something that, you know, we should be able to work out in our heads. But when we're sort of working it out in our head, we're almost jumping on. We're jumping on like we would do in a number line. Okay, that's how I sort of think about it in my head. So I'm sort of thinking, okay, well, I've got 65 here and I need to get to 100. So I've got to work out how I'm going to jump to get to my 100. So the obvious thing to do is from 65 is to go to the next 10. So my next 10 would take me to 70. So that means I have added on 5 onto this number here to get to 70. Okay, now we could jump in different ways here. We could jump in one big jump here to get to 100. Or we might think, okay, actually, I want to just be sure about this. I want to count on in tens. So if I count a 10 here, that would get me to 80. Another 10 here would be 90. And then another 10 there would be 100. So I've got 3 10s here. 10, another 10, and another 10. So altogether, I have jumped in 5, 10, 20, 30. So 35 altogether to get to me from 65 to 100. Okay, so it should be 35 that we've got there as your answer. So hopefully you worked it out in a way similar to that there, okay, where we are thinking about jumping along, because that's a really good thing to picture in our heads when we're doing it. Okay, so question 3, let's have a look at question 3 together. So question 3 today was this one here. Find a quarter of 24. So we're finding a fraction of an amount. So when we're finding a quarter of 24, we've got to think about how we are splitting this up, okay? So a quarter of 24. Now, if we're finding a quarter, that means we've got to be looking at our denominator here, because remember our denominator tells us what we need to be splitting this number into here. Okay, we are going to be splitting this into 4 groups. We're dividing it into 4. Now, there's lots of different ways we can do this. We can do this pictorially, so we could have our 4 groups and we're going to split our 24 into. We sort of talked about this in class. Okay, so if I do myself my 4 groups here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that 24 I'm going to split between. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Oh, now look, we're onto our tally like we did with our handling data last week, aren't we? So I could go like that, how to make it easy to count. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. There's my 24 split in my 4 groups there. So I can see that in each group I have got 5, 6. So a quarter of 24 is 6, because I can see it visually here. I've drawn a little picture, a little diagram to work it out to see how I can split it. Okay. Now, some of you might have been able to do that in your head, because you know if you find a quarter of something, what you're actually doing is you're halving it and you're halving it again. So if I halve 24, half of 24 is 12. And then if I halve it again, half of 12 is 6. So I still get my 6. Doesn't matter which way I do it. It's whatever way works best for you, whichever way you feel more comfortable with. Okay, so our answer for that one there, though, should be 6. And there's just slightly different ways that we can go about answering it. So our next question today went back to our history work, because it's getting us to think about how we would write 9, the number 9, using Roman numerals. Because when we were looking at time and looking at different ways that we can tell the time, Roman numerals was one of the things that we had to look at there as well. So I wonder if we can remember how we write the number 9. It's a bit of an unusual one, if you remember. So number 9, we would write as a 1x. So remember, x is 10, and the 1 here comes before the number before 10, which is 9. So that's what your number 9 should look like in the Roman numerals. Okay, so nothing to work out there. It's one of those ones that we have to try and remember and think about. And then the last question today that you have on your 5-a-day is a sequence number. Okay, so your sequence, we have to look at the sequence, and then we've got to try and continue the sequence. So the numbers that you've got in your sequence today are 36, 40, and 44. Okay, so we've got to think about, well, how am I getting from this number to this number, and then from this number to this number here? How am I doing that? Now, you might, depending on which times tables you are learning, you might recognize those numbers as being in a certain times table, but it's always good to check. So if I look at these two here, I'm thinking, well, how have I got from 36 to 40? Okay, so I've got 37, 38, 39, 40. I've added on 4 to get from there to there. And then to get from 40 to 44, I've also added on 4, 41, 42, 43, 44. So that's what is happening in this sequence. We are adding on 4 each time, because these are numbers that are in the 4 times table. But we're getting towards the end of our 4 times table with these numbers here. Okay, but we've still got to be able to carry on that pattern and be able to add our 4s on. So the next 3 numbers then I've got to put into the sequence here now. So finished at 44. So if I add 4 onto 44, 46, sorry, 45, 46, 47, 48. So there's my 48. And actually, I know that this here is 11 times 4, which is 44. So 12 times 4 is 48, and that's sort of our times table that we should know. But I'm now going into numbers outside of our 4 times table, but I still need to know what's going to come next in that sequence. So if I'm adding on 4 to 48, I'd add 49, 50, 51, 52. So 52 is going to go into here. And then adding another 4 on, I add 4 onto my 2 I've got here in my ones column, I'm going to get 6. So my next number, or my final number in my sequence, is 56. So those are your 5-a-day questions for today. So hopefully you've got on okay with those. Don't worry if you haven't, if there's something you forgot about, because that's the whole point of 5-a-day. It's just to remind ourselves of things. Okay, and sometimes we learn better when we get things wrong, because it sticks with us sometimes. So those are your 5-a-day. If you want to, send them in to us. Let us know how you've got on with it. Okay, but don't worry if you can't, because it's more for you, really, for you to see how you're getting on with your 5-a-day. And if there's anything, actually, I'm sort of not sure about that topic, I think I need to go and think a little bit more about that. Then it's for your benefit, really, okay, that we do that. So well done, though, for giving it a go. And hopefully we're in our maths zone now. So I did say to you that today we are actually going to be looking at something we've done before, so like we do with our 5-a-day. We are going to be thinking about this week our column addition, column subtraction, and some problem solving. We're going to do it step by step as we go through the week. We're not going to do it all in one go. We're going to just remind ourselves bit by bit as we go through. So today we're going to start off with our column addition. So we need to remind ourselves of what the rules are for how we use our column addition. So you can see in the background here, I've got my squared paper, because that's really important in helping us with our column addition, to remind us of how we set it all out. So we're going to start with what I'm hoping is going to be quite an easy one to do. And as we go through, we'll probably remind ourselves of which sorts of sums are the easier ones to do. So let's start with, we're going to go with 342, and I'm going to add to that 125. So that's my sum that I am working out there, 342 plus 125. So that at the moment is not set out in our column addition. You remember, we line up all our columns really carefully when we are thinking about our column addition. So just to remember and get into good practice, I'm going to put down my hundreds, my tens, and my ones column there. Okay, just to let us remind ourselves of how that is set out. Okay, so into this part here, I'm going to start with my biggest number, 342, and to that I'm going to add my 125. So I'm making sure that everything is lined up. I haven't gone over into this square over here. I'm making sure my hundreds are lined up, my tens are lined up, and my ones are lined up. So we're now going to add them together. Now, there's a rule about this, isn't there? I wonder if you can remember the rule about which column we add up first when we are doing our column addition. Can you remember which it is? Do I start with my hundreds? Start with my tens? Do I start with my ones? Which column do we start with first? Yes, well remembered. It's the ones column that we start with. So in my ones column, I have got 2 and I've got 5. So 2 and 5, I know, is going to be 7. So I'm going to put 7 into my ones column there, straight underneath. Now go to my tens column, because I work along one at a time. So in my tens column, I've got a 4 and I've got a 2. So 4 add 2 is 6. So 6 is going to go into there. This means now my last column, hundreds, 3 add 1, nice and easy, which is my 4. So my answer is 467. Okay, can't quite see it on there, but I have written it onto my board there. I'll just slide along ever so slightly. There we go, 467. So that was quite an easy one to do, because what we didn't have any of in this sum here was any carrying over. So if you remember, sometimes we get some larger numbers, which means we have to move over to the next column. But when we have got numbers that are like this, where we haven't got to do any carrying, it does tend to make our life a little bit easier, because all we've got to remember to do is to line everything up in the right column, making sure I've got my hundreds, my tens and my ones. And then as long as we're just being really careful when we come to adding, because you know it's easy to make a mistake sometimes, as long as we're just checking as we're going along that that's a sensible answer I've got, then it's nice and easy, fingers crossed. But sometimes, like I said, we do have to think a little bit more. We've got some carrying to do. Okay, so let me just go on to a new piece of paper here. So if we are looking at some different numbers, okay, so if we were looking at example 428, and to this one, I'm actually going to start off by adding a 2-digit number to this one here. So I've got 428, and to that I'm going to add 25. Okay, so that's my sum I'm going to be trying to work out. So again, we're going to do our hundreds, our tens and our ones. And you don't need to do those headings if you don't need to, but for some of you might just find that quite a helpful thing just to do, just to remind yourselves when we're setting it out. So I'm going to start with my biggest number first, 428. So that's all lined up there. Now to that, I'm going to add, don't forget we're putting our add sign down here, I'm going to add my 25. Now I've got to think this time, 25. So that is 25 is made up of 2 tens and 5 ones. So my 2 is going to go into my tens column. It is not going into my hundreds column here. I've got to get it all lined up. So my 2 is coming into here, and then my 5 ones is obviously going to go into my ones column there. Now we've seen it, we might be able to spot where we have got something that we're going to have to think about in a little moment. So I've got my equal signs there ready. The column that I'm going to start with, as we just reminded ourselves in the last question we did, is our ones column. Okay, we always start with our ones column to begin with here. So in my ones column, I've got 8 and I've got 5. Now, if I add 8 and 5 together, so it's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I've got 13 if I add 5 onto my 8. Now, 13, that's a 2-digit number. I can't put 2 digits in here. So this is where we come into our carrying over. So 13 is made up of 1 10 and 3 ones. So my 3 ones is of course going to go into my ones column because that's where it belongs, in the ones column. My 110 I need to take over to my tens column, but I need to put it somewhere where I can see it and where I know it is and I don't forget about it. So my 110 is going to go over here. Okay, and I'll just put it just underneath my equal sign so I can see it, but it's not going to get in the way of my other tens. Okay, but I know I've got to deal with it. So, and you can remember, if you look, you can actually see the number 13 diagonally written down there. Okay, so you can just check and make sure that it makes sense. So now in my tens column, I've got my 2 that I had here already. I've got this 2 that I've got here already. So 2 add 2 is 4, but I've also got my 1 down here. So we talked about how we can, just to make sure we don't forget about it, just put a line through it so we know we've dealt with it. So 2, and that 2 is 4, as we said, and then this one is going to be 5. So we're going to put 5 into our column there. And then that means that in my hundreds column, I've just got my 4. I haven't got any hundreds in this number here because it was a 2-digit number. I haven't carried anything across that I had to worry about here. So I've got my 4. So that is my final answer. 453. Okay, is my answer there for my addition sum with carrying. So the next one we're going to have a look at is going to be slightly bigger number. Okay, so let's look at this one, remind ourselves of how we get on with this one. So let's go with 2 3-digit numbers this time. So we're going to do quite a big one. I hope you're ready for this. 742 add 500 and let's go with 29. It's going to be quite a tricky one now, so we're going to see how we get on with it. First thing I need to do is set it out in a column, because at the moment it's not in a column and I need to have it in the column. So 742 add 529. I've got 2 3-digit numbers this time. So I've got, it's a little wobbly line, wasn't it? So I've got my columns all lined up nice and easily this time because they're both 3-digit numbers. Again, I'm going to start with my ones column. So in my ones column, I've got 2 added to my 9 there. So flip it around, do 9 add 2. Remember, with adding, doesn't matter which way around we do it. So 9 add 2 would be 10, 11. So 11 is a 2-digit number. My number 11 there. So remember, my 1 here in my ones column is going to go into my ones column. My 110 here that makes up my number 11 is going to go over into my tens column there. Now in my tens column, I've got my 4 and my 2, which is 6. And with that one there, it's crossed out, remember I've done it, is 7. Perfect. Now carrying over to do that time because it's fitted into there. It's a single digit number. It gives us 7. But what happens now? In my hundreds column, because this is such a big number, I've got 7 add 5. So 7 add 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So again, I've got a 2-digit number here. Now this is my 12 hundreds because I'm in my hundreds column now. So I've got 12 hundreds. So if I was thinking about what that number looks like, there's 1200, 12 with 2 zeros after it. So I'm now getting to thousands, look, because my 200 here, it's 1200, 12 is made up of, my 1200 is made up of my 200s there, is going to go there. And this one here, which is like, becomes my thousands, is going to go over here. I actually don't have a thousands column there at the moment because we're only looking at 3-digit numbers, but it doesn't matter because I can just create a thousands column. So my 1, I haven't got any other thousands here, but my 1000 that I've now got here, I'm going to bring it over into here. So I've now got my answer of 1271. So we're still carrying over if we need to carry over and making a new column, okay? Because what we had here is my 1200s. So my 200 has stayed there and my 1000s has now become my 1000 here. So my answer altogether, can't quite fit it in there because it's such a big number, is 1271. So that's a little recap. I'm hoping you remember most of that from before. But as I say, sometimes it's good to have a little practice just to remind yourself. So in today's folder, there are some questions for you to have a go at answering. Now, with the questions, I just put the sheet up so that you can see an example of the type of sheets that we are looking at today. So this is your 5 a day. This is going to be the sorts of questions that you're going to be looking at today in the folder, okay? So yours might look a little bit different depending on which group you're in, but you're going to have some column addition sums. Now, you could write the answers onto the sheet, on the print it off and write the answers onto the sheet there. However, I think personally, it's really good practice to think about setting out your sums and lining it up just like we've been doing together on the board here. So if you could, it would be a good idea to not write on the sheet, because if we were in classroom, sometimes I'd say, not going to write on the sheet today, you're going to write in your book. So this is one of those moments where you're going to do the sum, but you're going to set it out in your book on the squared paper and make sure everything is lined up. And it's just good practice to get into that habit of doing it. Okay, so if you can today, please try and write the sums out onto squared paper into your books. And then you'll get your answers written down. Now, at the bottom of the sheets for squares and hexagons, there's a little challenge question there for you. So once you've had a practice at using the method, there are some challenge questions at the bottom, which are the challenge questions. They're going to challenge you. They're going to get you to think about what the missing numbers are in the sum. Have a go at them and see how you get on. Okay, it's always good to push and challenge yourself once you've reminded yourself of the method that we're going to be using. So that is today's work. Good luck with it. Hope you get on okay. I'm sure you will, because when we were in class doing this, you did it really well. So it's just making sure we remember how to do it. So I shall catch up with you tomorrow with some more maths tomorrow, and we're going to be looking at column subtraction tomorrow once we had a go at the column addition today. So have a good day. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Bye.